1 week of the month? How did it work?
Different.
You have like 3 days. Saturday, Sunday Mass, like when he was there.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then
he would go to wherever.
Week in each place.
more or less a week in each place, more or less.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, and then, so you get more or less 1 week in a month, more or less. Right, okay. All right. So this is almost somewhat similar. You get the Mass on a Sunday once a month. In any case, what about the parish here? Now, what has been the reaction of the parish? You know, Father Toke was very violent up there in Brisbane. And down here in Sydney, what has been the reaction of the parish here, of the priests?
It's been more like an elder choir.
Very quiet.
Yeah.
Very quiet, yes.
The silence is deafening.
The silence is definitely right. And are they silent also about what kind of things? Are they silent about everything, or
Any information or anything.
Pope Francis, the situation, what's happening with Rome? I believe the tactic has switched to the silent, complete silent tactic, because the 2012 tactic, between 2008 and 2012, the tactic was, let people know that something is happening, and then don't tell them what's happening. But they have some knowledge. There are negotiations with Rome. Things are developing. It's looking positive. Rome is converting. Generic type statements like that. But then nothing specific. And then so the people were psychologically ready for a deal in 2012. Well, it turned out to be a disaster. It turned out that the people weren't ready. And so now it's just keep a low profile, and they'll just make an announcement at the end. Just one little note before going through Father McPherson's arguments here. The recent scuttlebutt that have been mentioning to everyone the last about month or so. About a month ago, three different priests called me. I think it's been about a month now. And one priest called me about his Italian priest friend in the congregation for the clergy in Rome. And Novosoto priest. This other priest was, originally in Rome, and then he was ordained and reordained and helping the society and so on. And he has a priest friend who contacted him from Rome. And he said there was a really fat priest from the Society of St. Pius X who came to the congregation for the clergy at the end of January and the beginning of February. Over the course of 3 days, there were 4 long meetings in which this very fat priest, who was representative of the SSPX, was dealing with the congregation for the clergy concerning ironing out the final details of the future relationship between the Society of St. Pius X and Rome. To iron out the details. And so these details are being ironed out, and that fat priest, the Italian couldn't remember the name of that fat priest, but his name is Father Anglès. Father Ramon Anglès, who had come from Ireland, and who was there as representative of the society. And the scuttlebutt was at the conclusion of this meeting of the priests and the congregation for the clergy is that by August of 2014, a deal with Rome will be concluded. Meanwhile, Father Pfluger said a similar thing in Germany just recently. Father Sauer reported, and also in France. Also reported also a few weeks ago to me. A priest called me from Belgium saying that Father Pfluger had said that there will be a deal with Rome completed before the end of this year, 2014. Meanwhile, Father Pfluger also prepared the way for this canonization of Pope John Paul II, saying, we're not happy about it, but don't worry, don't be disturbed, don't be discouraged, don't be too upset, don't overreact, because it's normal that these modernists or these modern popes canonize each other. So it's just normal for them to canonize each other, so don't overreact to this. So there's kind of a damage control, so that when the canonization comes on April the 27th, Mercy Sunday, which is another problem, because the Divine Mercy devotion is a hoax and is false, and it was condemned by Pope Pius XI and then by Pius XII, and it was a false devotion. And this false devotion was created or recreated or brought back for the purpose of being an antidote to Fatima and an antidote to the devotion to the Sacred Heart, which devotions are necessary for our times. And so the divine mercy is like a demonic antidote against the Fatima and against the the devotion to the Sacred and Immaculate Heart. And so the Divine Mercy Sunday, the New Mercy Sunday, is the day in which John Paul II is going to be canonized as saint. So they're doing damage control for that. Also, we're finding once again the priests talking about, why can't we make a deal with Rome? And now it's interesting that in 2012, one of the things we heard at that time was, we don't know if there's going to be a deal with Rome. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's in the doctrinal statements that have gone on between the society and Rome. We don't know if there's been any compromise. We don't know what's going on. And besides, we can't make any judgments about this. That's what the conservatives were saying in the society. Now, the conservatives are saying, well, it's just a prudential decision to make a deal with Rome. One of them, for instance, is Bishop Tissier. Bishop Tissier de Mallaré said in 2012 that to make an agreement with modernist Rome equals a compromise of faith. Because you can't agree with someone unless you agree. And if you agree with someone who's a heretic, you're agreeing with his heresy. So there's no way of making an agreement without agreeing. Therefore, as long as Rome remains modernists, we cannot make an agreement with them. And then, of course, another priest pointed out to me, in fact, you can never make an agreement with an authority. You can only make an agreement with equals. If you have a house, and I have a house, we can make an agreement on what to do on the border between our properties. But you can't make an agreement with the king. The subject can't make an agreement with the king. The subject obeys the king, or the subject disobeys the king. But in no case can he make an agreement with the king. A king can make an agreement with another king. A subject can make an agreement with another subject of equal rank. But you can never make an agreement with the superior. You will either obey because his commands are legitimate, or you disobey because his commands are illegitimate. Once the king comes back to his senses, you obey again. That's why we give the example of King Nebuchadnezzar. Emperor Nebuchadnezzar is one of our arguments against sedevacantism taken from sacred scripture. That Nebuchadnezzar was the emperor, the king of Babylon. And he went nuts. He thought he was a cow. He became very proud, so God punished him by making him think he was a cow. And he moved and he ate grass for 7 years. And during those 7 years, he was still the king. And the people of Babylon, and the lords and nobles of Babylon, they fed him good grass, and they let the king walk around and moo in the papal palaces. In the palaces of the king. But he remained king. However, during those 7 years, they never obeyed him. A regent took over the authority of the running of the kingdom of Babylon, and Babylon continued to run in the absence of the king, even though the king was there. They ran in the absence of the king because the king was nuts. And then after 7 years, the punishment was over, and the king woke up one day, and he was back to his normal self. When the king came out, and it was clear that his mind had returned, immediately the regent obeyed the king, and the kingdom continued under the dominion of Nebuchadnezzar. And so he remained king when he was nuts, and he was king before he was nuts, and he was king after he was nuts. And that during the time that he was nuts, they didn't obey him. The time before he was nuts, they did obey him. And the time after he was nuts, they did obey him. If he had ceased to be king when he went crazy, they would have killed him and replaced him with a new king. And so they couldn't make some kind of agreement or any kind of pact. It's either obey or disobey. And so we can never make an agreement with an authority. The very notion is flawed. We either obey or disobey. We can't make any kind of crazy agreement. But in any case, some of the objections here, one of the parishioners in Wanganui was meeting with Father McPherson, and he laid out some arguments against. Some of them are not very much to them. Others are familiar old arguments. Why the resistance is incorrect and why we should do something, we're not doing the right thing and we should just stick with the new modern society of St. Pius X. The first argument. Archbishop Lefebvre stated in strong language that we cannot work together, that traditionalist and modernist Rome work in opposing directions. But after saying this, he still went to Rome for a long time to negotiate. Since we don't believe Archbishop Lefebvre was a hypocrite, we must conclude that his principle applies to certain levels or in certain areas only, and is not to be taken as a rule that fits all and everything. People can abuse quotes just like they can abuse Scripture to their own destruction. And so what Father is referring to there is a 1987 quote of Archbishop Lefebvre, when Archbishop Lefebvre was speaking to Cardinal Ratzinger. And he said to Cardinal Ratzinger, even if you give us a certain autonomy, independence, even if you give us a bishop, we cannot work together because you are working, Cardinal Ratzinger, for the destruction of Christianity. And we are working for you're working for the de-Christianization of society, and we're working for the Christianization of society. We are at adverse, opposite purposes, and therefore we cannot work together. And he said that in August of 87. Even give us autonomy, even give us a bishop, we cannot work together. But then after that, there were about 5 or 6 months of negotiations between the Society of St. Pius X and Rome. And so the argument is, Archbishop Lefebvre negotiated with Rome after he said we cannot work together. And therefore, it was possible to work together with Rome if the circumstances warranted it. And the answer is, contra factum non fit argumentum. Against the fact, there is no argument. Archbishop Lefebvre did not work with Rome at any point from 1974 until he died in 1991. He was given multiple opportunities to work with Rome. He only had to make certain concessions. So in 1974 he said, we reject modernist Rome, the Rome of neo-modernists and neo-Protestant tendencies. We reject it. We reject all the reforms. In 1975, they got the same thing, the suppression. And in 1975, he didn't accept it because he knew the Catholic Church needed to continue with Catholic priests who were being trained without heresy. And therefore, when Rome says, you cannot continue as a Society of St. Pius X anymore, he says, forget it. We must continue because there must be an organization within the Church that is maintaining the fidelity to the Catholic Church. That's why he said in 1974, at the end of the Declaration, the only way in which we can remain faithful to Pope Paul VI is by continuing the work that we are doing, training Catholic priests without heresy, Catholic priests who will be there to spread the social kingship of Christ, condemn all the errors. And so he continued that work. He didn't work with Rome, though they suppressed him. 1976, the suspension. And in 1976, he still didn't listen. In 1976, in the June sermon, he said, I was told a few days ago, all I had to do is celebrate one Novus Ordo Mass, and everything will be fine. All my problems will go away. Just celebrate one Mass. He would not compromise. He didn't do it. 1988, May the 5th, he was handed the protocol with the 5 points of that May 5th protocol. He rejected it. These are the 5 points which he rejected. When he signed his name to it in the afternoon, he realized that it was a mistake. He retracted it before the next morning, gave a letter to Father Duchalard to hand over to Cardinal Ratzinger, who was the one that gave him those 5 quotes, those 5 points, and he rejected them. He rejected them. These are the 5 points that were rejected by Archbishop Lefebvre. So, and the argument is, well, Archbishop Lefebvre accepted those points. No, he didn't. He rejected them. That's why he removed his signature. And then what did he say in June of 88? And later on, we went too far in negotiations. I didn't want to do the negotiations, but it's what they all wanted. It's what Bishop Tissier wanted. It's what Father Bizik wanted. It's what Father Schmidberger wanted. It's what many of the other priests in the hierarchy wanted. And so he said, I made an attempt for their sakes to let them see how it works with Rome. Let them see Roman games. Let them see Roman tricks. And we tried, and we went too far. We went too far. And therefore I had to back out of it, because if you make a deal with Rome, you will be recycled. The superiors form the subjects, not the subjects the superiors. You'll be recycled. So it's very clear. Archbishop Lefebvre never worked with Rome. And the argument that he worked with them is false. He didn't. At least not in the life between 1974 and 1991 when he died. He didn't. And they use that argument that he did. Bishop Fillet chose the most exemplary and outspoken anti-modernist to be on his commission dealing with Rome. How could that be if he was indeed warming him up to modernism? That's just ludicrous. The four men that were chosen, we don't know what they said. What was written? Society of St. Pius X between 2009 and 2011 had negotiations about doctrine with Rome. Discussions. I remember when 2009 at the priest meeting, I was one of the priests that complained. Several of us complained. And we said, what are you doing having secret negotiations, secret discussions about doctrine? You're going to have a secret discussion of whether or not Jesus is God? You're going to have a secret discussion of whether or not the Catholic Church is the true church? How can you have secret discussions about doctrine? You cannot have secret discussions about doctrine. You can only have secret discussions about political or secondary things. You cannot have secret discussions about doctrine. How on earth can you do that? Well, we must do that because the media. Well, don't worry about the media. The media will always lie. So you can trust them to do that. What we have to do is be open in the communication about the truth. So I was one of the priests that complained in each of the priest meetings during that time. And several other priests did the same thing. But they said, no, we're going to keep these discussions secret. And they remained secret. So how do we know that they were strongly anti-modernist? We have no evidence. Because whatever they wrote down and whatever they discussed with Rome has been kept secret. We don't know what they did, what they said. We have no evidence that they're clearly anti-modernist. Number 3, when the Archbishop said that the talking to Rome is useless unless they convert first, that's a 1990 quote, what do we understand by Rome converting? Do we expect a miraculous intervention by God first, whereby Rome becomes perfectly healthy again, and then after that the SSPX comes into the scene? Cannot God work with imperfect tools, the SSPX, in imperfect ways, negotiations, etc., but still get the same results in the long run? This third one is one of the reasons why the society is going to have to be punished by God. This third one is, what do we mean by convert? And the conversion of Rome, Archbishop Lefebvre said in 74, we must maintain this position, training priests, teaching the faith, opening chapels without permission of local bishops, going to the battlefield throughout the world to spread the kingdom of Christ without permission of the local bishops or Rome, until the light of faith shines over eternal Rome again. When the light of faith shines over Rome again, we don't need to do that anymore, except in our local areas, because Rome will be handing on the faith. But until Rome is handing on the faith, we must continue. And here's the simple question. That was the old policy of the SSPX. We continue in our work of spreading the faith against the local bishops and against Rome. When? Until Rome starts spreading the faith itself. Until Rome does that work on its own. Until the local bishops are spreading clearly the Catholic faith without compromise. Now, that's the policy of the SSPX and all traditional Catholic priests the last 40 years. So the question remains, has Rome in 2012, or now in 2014, have the bishops also started to profess clearly and unequivocally the Catholic faith? Have they started to clearly and unequivocally condemn all the errors, especially the modernist errors of modernism? Have they clearly expressed a true faith and are spreading that faith without compromise? And the answer is, hell no. That's the answer. Absolutely, positively not. They are not. And we deal with these people on a regular basis. We deal with them all the time. They not only not spreading the faith, they can't spread it because they don't know it. They don't even know the faith. So they are not spreading the faith. Even those that are having the Latin Tridentine Mass, what are they doing? They're having nice incense with modernist theology. And we don't need nice incense with modernist theology. We need the true Catholic theology. So conversion means they convert to the faith. Now, when he says, what do we mean by conversion? Well, do we mean a sudden and complete conversion, or do we mean a slow, steady moving towards conversion? And the answer is given by heaven already. We know the answer. The Blessed Virgin Mary said there will be a sudden conversion, an immediate conversion. It's very clear. La Salette, Quito, Ecuador, and Fatima. Very clear. A sudden conversion. And yet, so when this is a very subtle attack against the Blessed Virgin Mary, and we're noticing a decline, for instance, in the mention of Fatima. We're noticing a decline in the praise of the Blessed Virgin. We're noticing a decline in this emphasis on the victory of Our Lady. It's gone. It's more or less gone. And this is an example, this point number 3, of Father McPherson repeating Father Rothstand and Bishop Follet. That the argument is the SSPX will be the instrument that heaven uses to slowly, steadily, imperfectly convert Rome. Heaven says Our Lady will do it, not the SSPX. And Our Lady will do it by a special and miraculous victory. So we've got 2 ways of conversion. The heaven way, prophesied, and the modern way of the Society of St. Pius X. This won't work. Furthermore, one reason why the slow incremental conversion won't work is because of the depth of the evil of modernism and the depth of the heresy. That's why Archbishop Lefebvre said, towards the end of his life, we are not dealing with just collegiality, ecumenism, religious liberty. If we were only dealing with a few heresies, we could just fix them and we'd be all right. But that's not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a corrupted faith from the top of the head down to the bottom of the feet. Everything is corrupted. Everything. The whole Catholic Church and Catholic faith is filled with termites. You can't fix it. Only a miraculous intervention fixes it. No other way. So 2 different practices. Now one thing we have to point out, in order to be honest, one of us is right, the other one's wrong. But one thing for sure, the old SSPX and the new SSPX have different beliefs about what is meant by the conversion of Rome. One believes unless Rome fully converts, we don't make a deal with them. We don't put ourselves back under them. The other believes we can put ourselves under Rome without their conversion. So we have 2 different beliefs, 2 different teachings. So when the new society says we haven't changed, that's a lie. There's one change right there. And so one is right, the other one's wrong, but it's a change. And since it's a change, we need to admit that we've changed, give the reasons for the change, and why Archbishop Lefebvre was wrong in his methods. And then the 3rd point, use to convert. 4th point, Bishop Follet is being political with Rome. He's trying to concede as much as possible without conceding too much. Partly because he is being told by some cardinals that they are fed up themselves with the Novus Ordo to some degree, but they are frustrated themselves on all sides. He sees a lot of goodwill in Rome, but it is like that in politics, very sophisticated and complex. The answer to that is, if you think like that, you're a moron. You're an idiot. If you go to the swap meet in Kentucky, where all the people gather around and they're selling you widgets and gidgets, and there's an old farmer standing behind the table, and if you come in and say, I want to give in as much as possible, How much can you rip me off? Well, son, let's see. I'll go as far as you want me to go, boy. You're an idiot. You don't go into negotiations with an old farmer like that. You're going to be chewed up and destroyed. Son, we're going to have to learn you a lesson. That's why they say it back at home. Now, the fact is, this number 4 is, how stupid can you be? Bishop Fillet wants to give in as much as possible. You don't go to a charlatan and give in as much as possible. And here, a couple priests told me, old priests, Father Bolduc being one of them who died, another priest who was with the society, several priests working with Archbishop Lefebvre in the very beginning of the society said, you must recognize these characters in Rome are evil. They are not misguided people who are making a mistake with good intentions. They are evil. They know what they're doing. And if you see a lot of goodwill in them, you're an idiot. So this is a factor in which there's no excuse for this kind of stupidity. If you're 16 years old and you were born with certain mental deficiencies, it's understandable. But if you have worked in the world of men or dealt with real individuals, particularly in the realm of any kind of politics, you understand that these are wicked men. How do you think they got into the positions of authority which they have? They lied, they cheated, they stole, they did immorality until they got where they are. Do you think they're going to be all of a sudden virtuous and kind? We don't go to Rome in order to give as much as possible. What is the benefit in that? Now let us suppose that they are of goodwill. You come into me, and I have some interest in the truth, and you're carrying the truth, and you come in and say, well, Luther, it's really nice that you believe in Jesus. I think it's good that you believe in Jesus. Well, what? I'm a Lutheran. I don't want to hear that crap from a Catholic. It makes me want to vomit. You need to come in and say, you're a stinking Lutheran. You know that one of my duties in the last several years was meeting with priests and bishops in the Novus Ordo to try to bring them back to tradition. I met with over 300 priests, more than 20 bishops. And visiting with these priests and bishops, one thing was, and then of course before that, many others, but during this brief period of a few years, about 300 priests, more than 20 bishops. And visiting them, one thing we found is that because I was the excommunicated guy from the Society of St. Pius X, because I wasn't one of them, I never had to set an appointment. I just went into the diocese and said, I want to see the bishop. And the bishop opened the door, because he knew I wasn't one of his guys. Also, when I went in to talk to the bishop, he treated me with respect, because he saw me as a representative of something other than himself. Whereas if I was one of his slaves, he'd say, come back tomorrow. Who are you? You don't talk to me. But he was interested in what I had to say because I was a representative of something other than him. And then, when we would speak about the fact the new Mass was horrible, the Vatican II was horrible, some of them, particularly some of the priests, really, you're right, Father, you're right, Father, you're right, Father. But if I had gone in and said, I don't want you to understand, I really think you're a great guy, yeah, then shut up and do what you're told. You can't approach in a battle people like that and get any respect. This is a tactical stupidity. Number 4 is a tactical stupidity. Bishop Fillet is trying to be political with Rome. He's trying to concede as much as possible. And also, look at this. Archbishop Lefebvre was not political with Rome. Archbishop Lefebvre refused to be political with Rome. What happened? Rome came up with an indult in 84. Rome came up with an expansion of the indult in 88. Rome came up with the 2007 Summorum Pontificum. Rome tried to spread priests throughout the world to deceive others. And so the Latin Mass, even being spread, how did it spread? Because Archbishop Lefebvre refused to back down. Had he not consecrated those 4 bishops, had he not been politically uncharitable with Rome and unbending, there would have been no concessions given by Rome. That's how consent. What do you do when you're negotiating? You try to find out how high the other guy is willing to go. And there you decide, I either make the deal or I don't. And if he's not going to budge at all, I make the deal. You don't go maneuvering back and forth. It's political stupidity. Number 5. Father Giselle said, in very strong language, that Our Lady did not grant the answers requested by the Rosary Crusade. How could he condemn Our Lady's answer to our prayers by considering that the answer she gave was not perfect, not good enough, therefore it was not an answer at all? How could he dictate what Our Lady should have done? I don't know what he's trying to say there. The answer of the Rosary Crusade, they claim the Rosary Crusade was, remember that Rosary Crusade of 2012, originally it was for the consecration of Russia. And then when April came along, Father Pfluger and then I think Father Wallier and some others made an announcement, we can count on a miracle of the Rosary Crusade to happen again. As if the Rosary Crusade was for the deal with Rome. What do you mean the Rosary Crusade is for the deal with Rome? That's why I gave my first sermon, April 29th. When I heard the talk of Father Pfluger and the statement of the others in the Philippines at the time, they said they're saying the Rosary Crusade is going to bring about this miraculous union with Rome. When we have been saying the Rosary Crusade theoretically for the consecration of Russia, and now they're going to switch it. They said the last Rosary Crusade was a miracle. The Rosary Crusade gave us Summorum Pontificum, which is an abomination. And the Rosary Crusade gave us the lifting of the excommunications, which was another abomination. And now they're going to say the Rosary Crusade is going to give us a deal with Rome? Absolutely, it's horrible. Absolutely terrible. And the Rosary Crusade did not give those things. They are manipulations, political manipulations. And in fact, it's a sign of communist tactics. Because the way the communists, one of the ways in which the communists try to take over a group, make them involved in the revolution. Make them think they're a part of the revolution. We're doing this for you. You can do your part before we enslave you and throw you in the gulag. You get to carry a banner that says, "I'm better red than dead." You get to participate in the revolution. You get to put cogs in the wheel of the machine before we destroy you. Participate. And so the active participation is one of the tricks of the communists. So we get the people to do their part to participate in the deal with Rome by praying for it. We shouldn't be praying for such foolishness. We pray for the conversion of Rome. We don't pray to have a deal with Rome. Number 6. Bishop Fillet already said that, and before it happened, that lifting of the excommunications was not meant to vindicate us. He said that the exact wording doesn't really matter. He considered it more a step that would cause the outside world to lose their favorite stick and would enable many to come closer to the SSPX and benefit from it. Well, let's look at the results of that lifting of the excommunication in 2009. It was a lie to begin with, because there were no excommunications to lift. Whenever you accept the lie, we learn in moral theology, lying is normally a venial sin. Usually. Sometimes it's a mortal sin. But it's always intrinsically evil, which means under no circumstances can you ever lie. No exceptions. So even, theoretical case, supposing you had to tell a venial sin of a lie in order to save 1,000 people from murder. If you gave that lie, that venial sin would become a mortal sin, and you would go to hell. You can never tell a lie for any purpose. The end does not justify the means. It does matter. To accept the lifting of excommunications, when those excommunications can never be lifted since they were never valid to begin with, equals accepting a lie, which is intrinsically evil. And for Bishop Fillet to say that that doesn't matter is against dogmatic and moral theology. This is completely false. Furthermore, what was the end result? Did it benefit Catholic tradition? No, it didn't. It didn't at all. People are still leaving the Society of St. Pius X for the Endo, not the other way around. We are shrinking. Before 2007, before 2009, we were growing. After 2007, 2009, we are shrinking. It didn't work. There's a few exceptions, like some little places here or there where there's growth, but overall, in the whole society, there's shrinkage going on. It didn't work. Then 7, 8, and 9 are Bishop Williamson's bad. The wrong when Bishop Williamson jeopardized his ministry for the sake of an argument from secular history. Number 7. Number 8. Bishop Williamson, prior to the Holocaust issue, had already personal issues with Bishop Fillet. Number 9. It was right for the SSPX to distance themselves from Bishop Williamson. See, whenever there's something, the only reason why you are Catholic, and the only reason why you're against Bishop Fillet is because you like Bishop Williamson. It's always the argument. You know, when I was in Germany, Father Jasny was standing there, and he was beginning to crumble. He visited, there were a little 3-hour discussion that's on the internet somewhere. There were a little 3-hour argument in a discussion in Munich, Germany. Father Jasny was the SSPX representative who came. He started off really happy, but then his little kingdom started to collapse. And he was starting to lose, and the people were, and he was not doing very well. And so as he was losing, he pulled out the Bishop Williamson. And he said, I see here people like Bishop Williamson. And then all of them went, and then the attack began. He tried. So if you like Bishop Williamson, therefore you're not Catholic. So Bishop Williamson has taken the place of Adolf Hitler. He's taken the place of Satan. So all you have to do, Bishop Williamson. Oh, that's terrible. And so, what does Bishop Williamson have to do with the price of beans? We are fighting for the Catholic faith. We are fighting the Catholic truth against errors. And what do you do when you're losing? Pull out the Bishop Williamson Club. So Bishop Williamson jeopardized his ministry by saying that there were not 6 million that died in the Holocaust. Well, and also another important point, taking an argument from secular history. You know that there's only one kind of history? The story of man rejecting and accepting God. There's only one history. There isn't a secular history and a religious history. That's already a problem for a Catholic. There is only one history. And the center of history is the day that Jesus Christ died on the cross for our sins, and there was a Holocaust. He was burned up on the cross for our sins by an act of sacrifice. And what do the Jews do today? They repaste the Holocaust of Jesus Christ's crucifixion for the salvation of the world to the Holocaust of 6 million Jews for the destruction of the world in a new religion. It's not a secular thing. It isn't just secular. It is a matter of religion. It isn't just secular. And furthermore, he didn't jeopardize his ministry by saying those things. He's been saying those things for 25 years. First thing I heard when I went to the seminary. Besides, my first day in the seminary, we went in. We had to sit down and write down on a piece of paper. We pulled out a piece of paper. I am an off. Write it down. So we had to sit there. I am an off. Very good. And then he said, if you want to leave, there's the door. The door is always open. You can go out any time. Welcome to the seminary. That was the first day. And so, then after that, we learned about the Holocaust, Jane Fonda, etc. And so, so there was our seminary training. Now, the fact is, he always related sacred scripture, Catholic doctrine, our faith, with the real world. Because our faith is the real world. And one of the tragedies of the new seminarians and the new breed coming out of the seminary is that they believe that there's a secular world and then there's a spiritual world. The problem with that is the secular world keeps growing and growing and growing and growing, and the spiritual world keeps shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And that is called modernism. The heresy of our time. St. Pius X says, in the beginning, the modernist says, There's secular history and there's religious history. There's secular science and then there's religious faith science. And they're two separate things. But as time progresses, he makes the religion under the science. He makes the religious under the history. And the next thing you know, history grows and science grows and religion gets smaller and smaller and smaller until there's no God. And he has been crushed out by the modernists. That's the trick, says St. Pius X. And this is what's happening in the SSPX. The modernist trick is continuing, is growing. We don't distinguish between the secular and religious. There's only the religious. There's only one world. God made Adolf Hitler, and he judged him when he died. God made Stalin, and he judged him when he died. God made everyone to be Catholic. He made everyone to adore him. He is the governor and ruler over all human history, period. And so it's a false distinction. Bishop Williamson, he had personal issues with Bishop Fillet. So what? It has nothing to do with anything. Bishop Williamson has never at any time in his life made his personal issues with Bishop Fillet the reason for any of the points that he has made against the new neo-SSPX. So that's a false argument. It was right for the SSPX to distance themselves from Bishop Williamson. Why? Because they're a bunch of cowards? No. According to Father McPherson, they distanced themselves from Bishop Williamson because they were scared of the Holocaust issue. That's the excuse. That's not the truth. The truth is, the SSPX distanced themselves from Bishop Williamson because Bishop Williamson was a visible symbol of Catholic tradition. And he was a visible symbol of the old SSPX, crotchety, right-wing extremists, nuts, conspiracy theories, etc. And that it was Catholic, recognizing there's problems in the world, and we've got to spread the social kingdom of Christ. Now that had to go, because we have to have a new society which is incense, smells and bells, without any substance. And therefore Bishop Williamson had to go. It wasn't because of the Holocaust, it wasn't because of fear. Number 10, Father Pfeiffer has always had a tendency to ignore authority and do his own will. For example, he insists on wearing a white cassock. It's got yellow spots on it. Which is normally only used for the missions. He refused to shave when told by a superior to do so, even though this is not a matter of importance to the faith. So Father Pfeiffer has a tendency to ignore authority and do his own will. Now during the course of the 20 years of priest now, during the course of those years, from the time I was ordained until the time I was expelled in October of 2012, I always obeyed the superiors. The first 10 years, they were all happy. Then there was a few years of toleration. And then the last few years, they were less happy. But Father Couture was always good to me, until he gave me the boot. But Father Couture was always good to me, and even though there were little challenges here and there, but he was always good to me, and I was able to operate freely in the Asian district. I was very grateful to go from the United States to Asia when I did. I went to the United States and Asia in 2005, or maybe it was 2006 that I went to Asia. And so at that time, the society in the United States was changing. Previous to that time, I was able to function as any priest did from the 70s until 2005. But Father Rostam was beginning to change everything in the U.S. So I left before all the changes. I never had to deal with the changes of the way they were doing things in the U.S. Now I see it's so totally different there. I'm glad that I was removed. Very grateful that I was removed in 2006 before all those changes happened. When I was in Asia, I was able to do the work in Asia. And I was always obedient to Father Couture. Things went along okay. And when he did require me to remove my beard. Because Father Onoda decided he had to remove the beard. All of a sudden, it used to be all the missionary priests were required to have beards before. And then they decided we had to remove the beard. And at one point he said, "You're going to remove the beard, I'm going to expel you," or something like that. Because there were several priests that didn't remove the beard when he said remove the beard. I was one of them. And then he said, "You have to remove the beard." So then I removed the beard. And I removed the beard. And remember, you see pictures of me without the beard. That would be in the first 6 months of the resistance. So when I went back to the Philippines in December or something of last year, Father Chazelle gave me orders to grow the beard back. And so he was mocking me for not having the beard. He, of course, he also was told to shave his beard. He did shave his beard. He grew it back after he shaved his beard. I shaved mine. I know this is very, very extremely important stuff, but it's one of the reasons why there's a crisis in the church. So in any case, but I did shave the beard. I obeyed Father Couture, and then I grew it back under obedience to Father Giselle. And then what do you call it? Where is it now? If you distance yourself and your children from the SSPX, your children will start to think that there is no authority above you. And therefore, they will later on in life also accept no authority above them, except maybe their parents. Also, and later, they will see the SSPX is still fighting Pope Francis. Now, this is an interesting point. Have you seen the SSPX fighting Pope Francis? When was the last time they fought Pope Francis? Basically, never. The closest was when Bishop Fillet said in October of 2013 in Kansas City, we have before us a genuine modernist. Right? The same sentence. And, and then, of course, he retracted it in December of 2012. A few months later, he said, when I said genuine modernist, I didn't mean that he was a modernist. I only meant that he's a practical modernist, not a theoretical modernist. So he retracted it. The one statement that he did make, advertised by John Bonari. And here again, it shows how when you try to make someone who's not Catholic, it doesn't work. So John Bonari was trying to pull out Catholic things. He was so listening to Bishop Fillet to find something Catholic, it disregarded all the non-Catholic things, pulled out the one Catholic word, and said, Bishop Fillet said genuine modernist. Very similar to what they used to do in the 80s with John Paul II. John Paul II would say, women can serve Mass, and we should worship with the Buddhists, and everybody can do whatever they want. All religions are fine, and priests should wear their cassocks. Headline, EWTN. Headline, Christendom College. Pope says priests have to wear cassocks. They leave out everything else in the statement. Right? And they put a headline, Pope said priests, and now they're trying the same trick with Bishop Fillet. It doesn't work. Then he says that when later on they will be fighting, they're still not fighting Pope Francis, even almost being excommunicated again. They will then think, why did my parents leave the SSPX? Why did they say the SSPX was getting too modern? After all, the SSPX is still fighting modernism. Is the SSPX fighting modernism? It's not. The best case scenario you see is that they make a few little passing remarks. That's it. Why not stay, number 12, why not stay in the SSPX until things become clearer, especially with Pope Francis? It's hard to get more clear with Pope Francis. It doesn't look like the SSPX sellout, if there is one, will make any more progress for a long time to come. And yet we hear the opposite this year. So the resistance will find it harder and harder to justify their position. Now here is one important element of these whole 12 points of Father McPherson. And he's just repeating the points of many others. There's nothing specific to him. He's just repeating the points of Father Rostand and others. They're skipping the doctrine. Sidestepping the doctrine. We made it clear from the very beginning. From May of 2012, from 20 hours of a priest meeting in the Philippines, myself, Father Giselle, Father Valen, we were there. Father Tim Pfeiffer, we were there in that priest meeting. If the society tries to make a deal with Rome, we reject it. Why? Because it equals a compromise of faith. Our problem is not one of prudence. Our problem is one of faith. And we are seeing, and the society accepting, for instance, 2007, Summorum Pontificum equals a compromise of faith. We cannot accept that the new Mass is the extraordinary rite and the old Mass extraordinary rite. I just got a call from a seminarian who wants to join our seminary in Kentucky, in England. He was in Germany, and the SSPX seminary in Germany. He's English, but he's German speaking. He was in the SSPX seminary, and he saw on the bulletin board extraordinary Mass available. Remember, they put it up on the website just a few months ago, but they took it down the next day. They took it down from the website, but they didn't take it down from the bulletin board. They didn't take it down from their announcements. We are accepting that the old Mass is the extraordinary rite. You cannot call it the extraordinary unless you accept the ordinary. Yet another acceptance of the new Mass. Why are we opposed to the new direction of the SSPX? Because the new SSPX teaches the new Mass is legitimate. That's a heretical lie. It's not legitimate. It teaches that Vatican II is in harmony with previous teaching. That's a heretical lie. What are they? They're doctrinal lies. Acceptance of the new doctrine. July 14th General Chapter says Vatican II remains stained with errors, which means it doesn't have errors in it, only the stain. We bring up ad nauseam doctrinal problems, and ad nauseam they don't respond. They pull out the Bishop Williamson card, they pull out the Deal with Rome card, they pull out the Prudence card, but they don't respond to the doctrinal problems. And then they make a generic statement, but we still don't like modernism. If you don't like modernism, stop teaching it. You need to retract these statements, and you need to say something different. But they're not doing that. And now what's happening? The slide is continuing and continuing and continuing. That's why it's dangerous now. The longer we're getting used to the idea of this deal with Rome. We're getting used to the new ideas that we don't have to be so negative against Vatican II. We don't have to be so negative against the new Mass. In January 2014, Father Pfluger said, we can't be too negative. They keep repeating that. The old SSPX is negative against modernism and against Rome. Our Lord Jesus Christ was negative against the Pharisees. Being negative is part of being Catholic. We have to do that. Now then, I don't know how things are developing here. It's just very dangerous. It's a slow slide, and the faith is in danger because of this slow slide. And the souls are walking away from the faith. We're seeing people leave the society and go to the Indo, leave the society and go back to Novo Sordo, and there's a great decline going throughout the world, a stagnation and a decline. And it's because there's been a loss of faith. So, our principal battle is because of the faith. That's what it's about. And to bring up these secondary things is just really kind of a waste of time. Foolishness, Now, with regard, I've been asking everybody, with regard to this deal with Rome, the scuttlebutt is that it's supposed to happen this year. I don't know if it will or won't. My inclination is that there's no great benefit in it happening. But it could happen. If it does happen, and the deal is finally signed, and Bishop Follet goes and kneels in front of Pope Francis, and everything is all wonderful, what do you think will be the reaction of the people here in Sydney? What do you think will be the general reaction? Do you think it will be a great negative reaction and a rebellion? Or do you think there will be almost no reaction or a rejoicing? What do you think will be the main reaction? No reaction. Yeah.
I asked Father Elias one Sunday ago.
Yeah.
Because I always said to him, Father, how things, are we getting this reconciliation of the bishops? What are we doing? And he said, I'm sorry to tell you, but it's not happening. I wish I could tell you something different. Father Elias,
because they know the left is saying. That's the problem.
But see, the challenge is, when you're not, it's true they're not allowed to say anything, and that was made very clear. In 2012, I was told by Father Couture, you cannot say anything that is critical of the Superior General, or critical of his direction, or anything that may be perceived to be critical of him or his direction. So not only to say something critical, but something that could be perceived to be. And the great example of the perceived to be is Father Hugo. You should listen to his June 17th sermon on the internet, June 17, 2012, in which he mentions Bishop Follet 0.0 times. He criticizes the SSPX 0.0 times, and he was expelled from the SSPX for that sermon. He did not criticize, but what he said was perceived to be a criticism. He just talked about the Cristeros. I was there at that sermon. Father Hugo, it was the first Mass of a new priest. So there were about 15, 20 priests at that sermon on that Sunday. I was one of them. I was there at ordinations. Father Rothstein was there, the superior. Father Beck, the number 2 guy, was there. And when he spoke about, I remember when he spoke about the Cristeros, and he just said this: when the Cristeros laid down their arms and they compromised with the government of Calles, there were more people killed on the day of the compromise than in the entire 4 years of the war. Because they laid down their arms, and Calles' soldiers took machine guns and they shot them all dead in one day. And when he said that sentence, there were more people that died in the day of the compromise than in the whole 4 years of the war. Father Rostand, Father Beck, and the other priests were they were going nuts. He did not mention the SSPX once. He quoted Roger de Lefebvre. He talked about compromise of faith. He gave the example of the Cristeros, which Father Hugo has done about 50,000 times, approximately. But this time, it was considered a grave affront. It was considered an indirect attack. Therefore, he was expelled from the Society of St. Pius X. And, you don't think the other priests got the message? They're called examples. I'm an example, he's an example, Father Chazelle's an example. Speak up and you will get your head chopped off. Therefore, don't speak up. That's a change. Very big one. So that's very serious. But anything else? Who thinks that? What do you think the people in the parish will do here if this deal with Rome is made up? What will they do?
People don't say much, really.
Right.
On the church.
I was trying to tell you, Father, that I write to Father Violet.
Yes.
So, in a letter of mine, I said a few days ago, I said, we still keep on going to rock days, and we don't see any change that we are willing and hoping to hear one Sunday. Now we're coming, reconciling the society to what it was. We don't hear any of that. And I said to him, one of these days, if they do some insanity, I don't know, what are we going to do with the left orphans? But he never answered after that.
Right.
I did. Rockdale did change. People did it. You can see it.
Well, how would you describe the change in Rockdale?
Well, people's not friendly like they used to be.
Right.
Even with the priests. They used to be good friends with priests.
Right.
But now they don't want to get involved with you. They're
Right.
too scared to say anything.
Right.
And I'm not the type of bloke to go banging on the back on it.
Right.
I try to keep it in myself.
Right.
But people, friends, we used to sit them around, have a cup of coffee, talk. It doesn't happen now. Soon the mess is finished, everybody goes. There's only a few of us who stay back.
Right.
So you can see Rockdale change.
Right. How long has that change been going on?
Well,
Notice.
so, money, say 12 months.
Right.
That's what happened with Noah's Order. Same thing. Everybody was leaving mass early.
Right.
How many adults do you think seriously taking Bishop Pereira's side to say?
I want no idea because the one that don't talk to me, I can't ask him anything.
Well, you know what's one of the big differences? We used to be open in the parish hall.
Yeah, that's
You could talk about anything,
Yeah.
and there was no
Correct.
fear.
Now,
Even if a guy comes in, he was a Sede Vicantis, we were mad at him because he's a Sede Vicantis. You stinking Sede Vicantis, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But he still was no fear. He could say whatever. And then, he still get a cup of coffee or whatever. Anybody could say more or less whatever they wanted. They weren't condemned, or they weren't threatened with refusal of sacraments, or, expulsion from the school. But nowadays, the threats are very big. And there's just a general atmosphere. Several priests, I would say more than 10 priests, told me within the society, they don't know what the other priest thinks in the priory. They live together in the same house. One of the priories, I spoke with one priest at one time. I spoke with another priest at another time in the same priory. Found out they both agreed with each other, but they didn't know that. Because they were afraid to speak to each other at table just in case the other one turned them in. There are several priests who are telling me they sit at the table in the priory and they're like, yeah, some potatoes. Okay. And they live in a state of fear in the priory. And they don't know who's in. When I was in the priory in America, and all the priories I've ever been in since I was a priest, we never had any fear. We talked about anything, everything, and whatever. Everything was open. There was no environment of fear in any priory that I was in. But now it's changed.
Everything's upside down.
Everything is upside down, yes.
The walls, the what?
Yeah. And they say, oh, nothing's changed. Everything's the same. Nothing's changed. But it has.
Is that like that Father Bolchon, you know him?
Father Vachon?
Yeah.
Yes, but it's been many years since I've seen him, yeah.
I approached him.
He's a good priest in one.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think he got a couple of nights missing.
Right, yeah. That's a normal SSPX priest. That's normal.
But otherwise he's alright. But if you talk to him about us here,
Right.
don't.
No.
Yeah, he's scared.
He gets
No,
mad.
he's not scared. He get upset.
Well, okay, right.
Peter, he upset him one night. Oh, but don't get here. Don't do that, will you?
No, that was my second time. The first time I went to him in Rose, and I said, Father, can you please tell me what is this problem? I wish we had what I knew here when I first came here, but now I see that there is this discrepancy with the clarity of the. And he says, what side are you on? I haven't got any side, Father. I'm with the Cyprus and Pfeiffer, the one that Archbishop Lefebvre left, you know, that one? That's my side. So, yes, he didn't have much to say to me,
Right.
you know.
And that's another big difference.
Yeah, but then the next Sunday he said there was only one real man in the parish with that or whatever.
Right.
You know, who went to him and said that.
Right.
You know. So with the same confidence I approached him in Kundabi. And I said, Father, how are things going now?
It is important to speak.
Yeah.
Because the priests, they don't believe that remember, priests are human beings as well. And they need the support of faithful. I mean, a captain can only be a captain if he has an army, right? So, you see, the priests are captains. And even though they should go out and gather an army, so to speak, if they have to, normally you get assigned, to an army. You get assigned to a unit. And when we're in a real wartime situation, the units have been destroyed, and you got to go out and recruit, that's difficult. Most people aren't built for that. Most priests aren't built for that. So what helps them is the faithful say, look, Father, we're standing for the truth. We want you to continue to stand for the truth, and if you do, we're going to support you. Right? He still has to make a great act of faith, and he still has to have some great strength to be able to make the step. But that helps him. Because remember, we're not in a vacuum. So even though you get in trouble and get kicked out, what's the big deal? And most of the time they don't kick you out anyway. It's happened. We've had 3 people refuse Holy Communion. We've had people expelled. We have one 5-year-old kid expelled from a school at the age of 5. It was pretty bad because of the resistance, And so, but I mean, that's not the norm. Normally that doesn't happen. But it has happened. So it can happen again. However, you be ready for it. But the thing is that it's important to be open. The problem with the truth is that when the truth is hidden, it has no power. Lies work great when they're hidden. Truth doesn't. Truth has a different way of waging war, a different way of attaining victory. It has to be open. So we got to be open about it. You got to talk to the priests. And you never know who might convert. You just never know. And,
We had a situation in the town like there were a number of churches.
yes.
supporting the system.
Yeah.
And last week I was accused of creating a scandal because they don't do the mass.
Right.
So one of the officers was sent by the
Right.
and he was threatened like to be expelled from the church. So,
Also, you may all be expelled.
well, it starts with me, I guess we're the next.
Right, right. Well, that's okay. Be ready for it. Don't be bothered by it. Because the expulsion is worthless. You just keep living the rule. And, you know, when I was expelled, it was worthless. You know, it was the guy who was giving it to me was weeping, but I wasn't weeping. Father Chazelle and I were very happy. We were together on the day that I was expelled and the day that he was expelled. October the 3rd for myself, October the 4th for him, 2012. They were glorious days, very happy days. So if they send you an expulsion notice, when Father Ortiz finally got his notice, I wrote to Father Ortiz. I told him, I said, Father, your name is in the March 2013 Corunum, even though he was already gone. But mine isn't. Because your name is in that modernist Corunum. And so I made fun of him. He goes, well, you know, because they left his name in there. They left the name of about 11 priests that were expelled to keep the numbers up. There were 11 priests whose names were listed who were expelled. But they left them in there so that the numbers of priests in 2013 would still look bigger than the number of priests in 2012. So, you know, that's not very honest to do that, but that's what they did. They didn't put the names of priests who were well known globally, they didn't put their names in. But the priests who were less well known globally, they left their names in. So only people individually might know that these were priests that were expelled. You can see the little trick, they didn't have any assignments. It's got our priest of the society, and then where you're assigned. So their assignments, of course, were blank. But their names were listed to keep the numbers up. Father Ortiz is in that list in March 2013 Glory. And when he received his expulsion notice, he sent a note to me. He was very grateful to finally get expelled. And same thing with Father Gerard, etc. Because they've compromised in the faith, and we don't want to have a part. We don't want to have any part with that. And the priests that haven't been expelled, they're the unhappy ones. And the priests that have been expelled are happy because we're standing for the truth of Archbishop Lefebvre. We're being faithful to the Society of St. Pius X. Whereas the priests on the inside are being unfaithful because they're compromising their faith. Something Archbishop Lefebvre would never tolerate. You know.
We know a lady in Europe, and she says that Father Nelly was a bum because he said he didn't care if everybody lived. We're still going ahead with our program
Yeah, that's true. Father Pfluger, the same thing. Take care of us, guys. But also, that's true. That's true. You know, they're committed. I'll give them this much: Bishop Fillet and Father Pfluger, and Father Nelly, I guess also, but especially Bishop Fillet and Father Pfluger. They are not retreating. They have made a decision. They have made a commitment, and they are persevering unto it usque ad martem, until death. And so at least they have conviction. Now, unfortunately, they're being devious along the way. They're doing wicked things along the way, and people let them get away with it. Like, for instance, Father Pinot, who's now in Canada, saying Mass for our people in Canada, in Quebec, French priest. Father Pinot was refused the right to celebrate Mass even privately, to hear confessions, to do anything a priest can do. That's an abomination before God. That is a sin that cries to heaven. But does anybody care? No. Bishop Williamson was thrown in the streets at the age of 72. Alright? That's a sin that cries to heaven. Does anybody care?
Yeah,
No.
I said
Absolutely not.
I said that to Father Violet in another letter. I said, the official church doesn't do this even to the pedophile priest.
No, they don't. Yeah, they don't.
He doesn't answer.
No. So one priest told me, my modernist bishop would never do to me what you guys. Yeah.
Isn't there a law in the church that a bishop cannot lower another bishop?
Basically, a bishop can never be in obedience to a superior general. only to the Pope, strictly speaking. So even though Bishop Williamson is a member of the society, he wouldn't be obliged to the same obedience that a priest would be obliged to. But for the purposes of administration and functioning, he should be obedient, but it's not strictly speaking the virtue of obedience. That's correct. They don't. But the auxiliary bishop doesn't have jurisdiction. And so to a certain, the auxiliary bishop is like, he's that odd man out, or he's that strange being that doesn't theoretically exist in the Catholic Church. That the auxiliary bishop, he does have a certain obedience that he has to have to the superior. Our 4 bishops are auxiliary bishops. They're not ordinary bishops. And although strictly speaking, that's not normal. So no bishop, strictly speaking, is supposed to give orders to other bishop, but there's a gray area there for the auxiliary bishop. And Bishop Williamson, by the way, wasn't disobedient anyway. The only time which they could argue his disobedience was his refusal to shut down Laity Commons, which of course he had the right to do. He could not be obliged to shut that down. And furthermore, even if he was obliged, there had to be a reason. And Bishop Williamson sent all of his Laity Commons to Bishop Fillet saying, "Show me what's wrong with it, that I might have corrected and amended." Bishop Fillet didn't show him any single problem until the actual final expulsion letter, and then the problems it did show were not anything substantial. But he didn't show him a single problem before that, not a single one. So it's useless.
Father, is it true that they expect repentance from you guys and go and say, we're going to come back and be with you again and so on?
Yes, they expect repentance, but I don't think with that comes forgiveness. I don't think that's in the works. But repentance, yeah. But again, when I was expelled, it was noted it was because of the teaching. Same with Father Chazelle. And they didn't say there was anything wrong with our teaching. They just quoted things that I said. On the 6th of June you said this, the 3rd of June you said that, in May 27th you said this, all of which were accurate quotes. I did say those things, and all of which were true, and they never said that any of them were false. They didn't state, for instance, I said that Bishop Fillet said that 95% of the council was okay. I didn't say that. And Bishop Fillet said that.
Yes.
So what's the problem? So therefore, they should say, well, you said something Bishop Fillet didn't say. You said something that was false. And here's why it was false, and so on. That's the way the church operated in the past. But they didn't say anything that was wrong. I wasn't accused of any specific crime. I was just expelled for teaching. But the teaching which was enunciated was never noted to be wrong. So, not a very valuable. That's why the canon lawyer expert who was advising Father Chazelle and myself said, don't acknowledge this because it's canonically worthless. It's canonically worthless. So don't even acknowledge it because you can give it some kind of credibility by acknowledging it. Don't even acknowledge it. But nonetheless, it's the paper is useless anyway. It's totally useless. We just have to continue to stand for the faith. And meanwhile, we have our seminarians in Kentucky, and they're doing well. A few seminarians there. A couple of seminarians in the Philippines doing okay. We've got at least 1 or 2 potential seminarians in India. We've got a couple in South America. We've got a couple that are showing interest again in Europe. So we just have to continue in the work that we're doing. Yeah.
There's only one direction, it's all going, Father.
Excuse me?
It's only one direction, everything's going.
Well, the society has made it very. It's clearly going only to modernism.
Yeah.
And it's not turning around.
Huh?
And even the conservative ones, traditional ones, aren't turning it around. They're simply compromising.
They've got their ears closed.
They've got their ears closed and they're changing the adjustment. Like Bishop Tissier, for instance, who said in 2012, it's a compromise of faith. I met him in 2013 in September, and he said that the union with Rome is not a compromise of faith, it's a matter of prudence. And so I immediately confronted him, and I said, Bishop Tissier, the Bishop Tissier of 2012 said, union with Rome equals a compromise of faith. The Bishop Tissier of 2013 says, it's not a compromise of faith, it's only a matter of prudence. Bishop Tissier responded to me, that's true, I've changed. But he never said why he changed. He just said, that's true, I've changed. Father Jean de Morgon, Father Jean, a Franciscan priest in Morgon, wrote a letter to Bishop Tissier, quoting the familiar quote we mentioned many times from Archbishop Lefebvre, unless you accept Quanta Cura, unless you accept the syllabus, it's useless to talk. Bishop Tissier wrote back, I know Archbishop Lefebvre said that, but Archbishop Lefebvre made a mistake when he said that. So you see, that's what happens to the good guys. You can't play with the devil and stay a good guy.
They're smarter than...
It's that simple.
It's more smarter than us.
That's right. That's right.
And how about Alfonso? What is the Bishop de Galarreta?
Oh, the Galarreta, I think he's just going along with Bishop Fillet. I don't think there's any change with him. As far as I can see, there's no change. The ones that were question marks were Bishop Tissier and Bishop Williamson. They were the ones against. Bishop Galarreta, I don't think he was ever really against. Tissier, yes. Williamson, yes. The Galarreta, I don't think so. And, and so, no, it's just that Tissier is sliding. But I think that the time may come, though, when he stands up. In other words, he founded the SSPX. His whole being is linked up in this survival and unity of the SSPX. And for the sake of unity, he's doing these things that are compromises. But I think that one day, it's very possible that he just says, enough. I'm going to stand for the truth again and follow Archbishop Lefebvre. And when he does that, he will be very strong. And I think that one day it's very possible that he might do that.
How do you believe him?
Excuse me?
How would you believe him?
Oh, he doesn't play games, Bishop Tissier. He's very honest. So if he stands up, you'll know about it.
Well,
there won't be any
if he
confusion.
does that, he'll have to leave and come with the resistance.
That's correct. But when he does it, it will be, if he does it, he's a skinny guy and he's kind of quiet and he's a little bit of a nerd. But if he stands up, you don't want to be in his path. He will chop you up into bits and spit you out and destroy you. It's not a good place to be. So if I think that when the time comes, if he stands up, he will be very, very formidable. There won't be he won't be confused. But right now he is, unfortunately. And right now he's given in. But I think it's very possible that at any moment the grace of God hits him and he stands up.
Although, Father, with the fact that he's staying there where he is,
I know, it's weakening him.
it's weakening everybody else as well.
It is.
Because if he stood up, many would stand up.
Now I think if he stood up, few would stand up, but they would be strong. If he had stood up in 2012, yes, many would stand up. That was the time. Now it's a day late and a dollar short. But it's still better than nothing, and some will stand up. And in the end, they'll be strong because he's going to be following Archbishop Lefebvre. And many priests are waiting. They want to see the bishop stand up. We got 4 bishops. That's all we have. And we need to see one of those bishops stand up. It's just like Archbishop Lefebvre. He was only an auxiliary bishop. But he was a bishop of the Catholic Church. He wasn't a bishop of some Protestant church. And the faithful needed to see a bishop of the Catholic Church. Even if he was an auxiliary in retirement. Which is what Archbishop Lefebvre was. Stand up for the faith. And Archbishop Lefebvre stood up for the faith.
Most of his work was actually done in the retirement age.
Yeah, he was a bit young for retirement. But he was retired because he was no longer useful for the modernist Rome. And remember, he was halfway through as superior general at Normally, when he would have retired in 1968 and resigned, the normal thing is he would have been given a diocese. But because he was too conservative and too Catholic, they said, you don't get a diocese, you just go back in your little, go hang out in Rome. And so that's what he did. And then he rose up as a retired bishop, as a what do you call it, auxiliary bishop. And and right now the church still needs bishops, and they're waiting for a bishop to stand up and be strong, and for a bishop to lead the souls in a battle against Rome. And that's our great challenge right now. We don't really have that. But I think God's allowing it that way in order to see who's going to stand up regardless. Who's willing to stand up without security? Who's willing to stand up without backing? And that's what we need right now. The backing will come one day. There will be a bishop. One day. God will provide whenever He wants. But right now, we just have to stand up and wait for the time to come.